This is real period. It's not, this isn't retro. I believe this all dates back to 68, 70. Never changed. It's an Astrosonic stereo console. This is one of the first solid state stereo consoles. And I did check it. It used to work years back. One of the channels is out, though I'm certain these things always need a recap. Always. I'm sure I need to take the chassis out of it and recap it. And these are a pain in the ass. 63, I want to say. Okay, so we're pulling apart this Astrosonic stereo console, and just so I'm clear on things here, when I ultimately go to put this back in, probably a year from now, whenever I get back out here, common and common right here. So one of these comes down to the external speaker hookup connection right here. So let's make sure that we have this thing unplugged. All right, so we got common here, and we got a common here. So that this one goes up to this right here. That's a common. The one that's got this spade that's got 2 on it goes to that common. And then what is this? I can't quite see that color. Is it orange? Looks like it's orange. Goes to number 1. And the other one, that's whatever color that is, since I'm colorblind, goes to 2, and that disconnects that. And then, what does that say? Pilot light. So these twisted black and red go up to the pilot light. Okay, so that should disconnect that stuff. Then the rest of this is like connectorized. So there's a blue and a yellow going to the line. Input. So this comes over from the tuner. So the tuner hooks up here. Okay. And then you've got your connector coming from the tuner as well. So that should disconnect this thing, which that must be power. Okay, so we will be leaving the crossover in here. However, the crossover has 2 8 microfarad Nichicon capacitors. I have no idea if they're any good or not. These Nichicons usually are pretty good. So 8 microfarad at 25 volts. We're going to bring 2 of those with us when we come back. Okay, so this comes from the power. We're going to disconnect the phonograph right here, so we're not dragging this harness around with us. Got it. Okay, so that's for the phono, as well as up in here. Let's get some light. Left and right, the red is going to be towards me. So that way we know that that goes back in there. So let us see if we can disconnect these. All right, so that will disconnect the phonograph. And it looks like there are 4 bolts holding the chassis from here and here. And then there are 4 holding the console that direction. And there's at least 1 here. And I hope that there isn't one on the other side because I won't be able to get to it, but we'll find out. Okay, so a couple corrections. Yes, right where David's pointing, we are going to remove the tuning like it says here. I forgot to do that. We're going to remove those 2 spade connectors. You do not need to take any of those out. For the escutcheon plate, it stays in place. You just take the handles off, or the knobs. Take all the knobs off. This is a little tight fit here, so we're going to see if I can compress it enough to get it out of here. It looks like I can. So it should just pop out. Oh, and the FM antenna lead comes down, and that goes on the back side of these spade connectors for the dipole right here. Okay, so it's June 26, 2021. So we have finished removing the console from the Astrosonic unit. All the hardware is inside. I only put a couple screws on the particle board pieces on either side in here, behind this cover, just to hold it in place. All the hardware is on the bottom inside so it doesn't get lost. And I've only put just a couple screws. The screws for this are also inside. Just 3 screws to hold this on. We clean the glass, and we'll just put the knobs in here just so they don't get lost. And after the tuner and amplifier are serviced, we'll put it back in here next time we're out. So I really wasn't going to do a video on this thing. I was actually just going to take it over to Shango next time I'm down there, but have him go through it. But I thought when I checked it out first in Palm Springs that the stereo multiplex wasn't working, and there's one channel was out, and I figured I'd just take it to him. But I don't think I'm going to, and the stereo multiplex is working. The bulb was just burned out. I've got all the 47 bulbs were burned out in this thing. The filament evaporation on these is just insane. So I put new lamps in it. The stereo multiplex is working. It's definitely got a bunch of caps with ESR issues for sure. I've gone through and kind of tested them. I'm using the Shango 66 method. I've got an amplifier with a speaker and caps. I'm just putting the caps in series, and I was going through and checking these, and I'll show you what a good one sounds like. It's actually the filter capacitor. One of the filter capacitors is bad, and it's like the last thing that I checked. Just wasn't I guess I wasn't expecting that to be an issue from what I was hearing in the system. But anyways, so let's listen to how that sounds. Let's hook it up to this cap right here. Listen to how weird that is. That cap is gone. And I'd bridge another one in there right now just to hear the difference, but yeah, it's done. So yeah, it's going to get a total recap. I already ordered all the caps for it from DigiKey, and we'll just go through and do them all. And if it doesn't work after that, or there's other issues with it, I don't think it needs an alignment or anything. It sounds the AFC's popping real well. The AM might be a little weak. We'll see if we can do anything with that. But that could have just been that I didn't have an antenna on the AM. Actually, no, it's got a loop antenna, so it should have been fine. So we'll check that out, but I may just recap this myself and call it good. I was worried that if it had a germanium transistor problem or something, that's outside my wheelhouse. These things are rare. I know the guy that's got them. You guys hear me talk about him all the time. He's got a good YouTube channel for vintage electronics. And he'd be the guy to work on it. But it looks like I might be able to do this one. So we're going to go ahead and we'll recap it, and we'll see how it sounds. I don't have the console with me. I just pulled the chassis out of it. It's got 2. It's got an amplifier chassis and the radio chassis, and the front end, really the front end and the amplification side. But yeah, that 1500 microfarad's just gone. So we're back on the Astrosonic stereo console chassis. I'm kind of chipping away at this. I'm doing the Mustang, for those that are following that. I'm doing that at the same time that I'm doing this, and the shop is just a complete and total disaster right now because I've got an entire car torn apart. But, I want to get this done anyways. So in the previous segment, I mentioned that this capacitor down here, this filter capacitor, chassis mounted, this guy right here, I marked it bad, had gone bad. And I'm still waiting for the caps, but I wanted to get it working. In the meantime, I had 1,000 microfarad that is a decent substitute for the time being. That's why it's just tacked in here. That's why the leads aren't cut or anything, and it's in here at an angle. But what I did was, because the new caps are going to be about this size, actually. The 1,500 microfarad will probably just be a little bit taller. But, you know, this little tiny cap replaces that gigantic cap right there. To keep the look, and I usually do this, I'm not going to remove them or anything like that because there'd be no point. And it'll keep the chassis sealed up too, having it in there. Keeps the dust from getting inside here because this seals up against, you know, the wood cabinet. I put 2 terminal strips in here. I put this one in here for the cap that's bad, and of course I'm going to be doing all the electrolytics, so the other filter right here will be on this terminal strip. So this cap uses the chassis as a ground. This one is floating. You'll notice it's not attached to the chassis right here, that the grounding lugs are in a piece of phenolic. Down here they go directly into the chassis. So all I did for this one is I simply, the bad cap right there, I removed the lead from that, which is the B+. I went ahead and put it here onto this lug, and then of course we've grounded it through the center lug. These terminal strips, the center tap on them is ground, will be common to the chassis. I just buy these on Amazon. You can get them in electronics stores, Mauser, DigiKey. They all sell them. But anyways, I think like I said, I got these on Amazon, and you know, real simple. That's a 3 lug. This is a 5. I've got some here, 5 lug type. But I made them nice and accessible, easy to work on. You know, it seems to want to sit this way on my bench because that's where the transformer is at over here. So it sits comfortably. So I made sure I faced it easy to work on for serviceability. But anyways, this one, like I said, is grounded here. This one, we don't want to use the common lug. So what I did was I've taken a lead. I just wrapped this around the lug here and soldered it on to the common lug right there and brought it over to this lug. And then when I have caps for this, the cap will connect to these two right here. And I will remove this line here. Right now I'm using the thing in the garage. I'm letting it burn in, see if anything else fails before I do a recap on it. But and I'm just using it to listen to music since it's convenient. I'm going to take this off of the cap here, and it's going to end up on this lug, and our new capacitor will simply be right here between these 2 lugs. So those are the only 2 I'm going to have to do that with. The rest of these are circuit board mounted caps. These all need to be replaced. Now these 2 right here, actually, you probably won't be able to see it, but I'll try. The solder joints are broken. That one, C8 right there. Yeah, maybe you can see that in the video. It's actually pulled away from the board, and they look like they've gotten hot in the past, and I don't know. That solder doesn't look standard to me. It looks like maybe those were replaced before. I know it was serviced. It's got a tag on the cord. So it was serviced at some point in its life. But anyways, so we're going to be doing all these electrolytics. So, and luckily you can get to everything from the bottom here and from the bottom here. I shouldn't have too much trouble replacing all the electrolytics. I forget if I mentioned this before, but I went ahead and I marked all the ones with yellow where the ESR is bad on them. And it's quite a few. So this thing, it works great now, but there's just definitely distortion in it. I'm sure that's from bad electrolytic capacitors. So we'll go ahead and get those swapped out. Caps are not always what's wrong with these guys. That happens a lot. Oh, you got to replace the capacitors. Yeah, I'm recapping this because it's going to get used. It's going to get used a lot. You know, I want it to be able to be used daily if we want. So I am going to be completely recapping all the electrolytics. The ceramic capacitors, those don't go bad. The disc caps, they never go bad. I might go through and check some of the resistors and just see, you know, usually they go up in value, but, you know, maybe they won't. Probably not enough where it's going to affect the performance of this thing. AM is very quiet on it. It's very possible. There are some axial electrolytic capacitors. Those axial ones, I think those go bad more than the radial ones do. And I did notice that some of the IF cans are coupled through some of those electrolytics. That'll definitely cause the AM to be quiet. So anyways, we're just waiting for the caps to come. We'll go through. We're going to do a bulk recap on it. We'll probably do a board at a time. Maybe if there's a lot on a board, we may do less. Just because you don't want to do too much. You got to take pictures, make sure you don't screw anything up. And you want to just do a little at a time, check it, make sure you didn't throw anything way off so you can trace your way back. If you go through and bulk recap this whole thing, you're going to be hating life because now you're not going to know which one you screwed up, and inevitably something gets screwed up when you do that. All right, so we're continuing on with the Astrosonic console here, and I got the caps in from DigiKey, and I started doing the filters. So I got the two here, as I showed you earlier. I put the terminal strips on here, so we're good to go there. And there's two more filters, and I've already replaced this one, and because they're radial caps, I've had to extend it with some wire. So this is fine. I didn't put any sheath on it or anything because it's never going to touch anything, so it'll be fine. And the same thing here. I went ahead and I took the solder out completely, and I'll go ahead and bridge this right in here. So these are the only ones I think that are point to point. I think all the rest of this is circuit mounted stuff. So we're going to get this power supply side done, and then we're going to try it and make sure everything's still good before we continue on. Now, I'll tell you, the traces on some of these are so cooked. The traces just fell off when I pulled the solder out. When I sucked the solder out of the old one. So what I did was, because the point connections just happened to be right here on C7 and 8 right here, I just folded the lead over and soldered it to the point where it goes on at least those two right there. I think that this one's still okay, and I think that this one's still okay. But these caps must get real hot because the board is baked. So yeah, those traces are done. So like I said, just put it through. If you're doing one of these, feed it through and just bend the lead of the new cap over because it's plenty long, and then J-hook it around the connection there. And that'll get you hooked up. It'll get you hooked up properly, because I think that these traces might have been broken. That actually might be the distortion that I'm hearing. All right, the amplifier board is now fully recapped. As a matter of fact, the amplifier chassis is completely recapped. I did forget to mention this too. They don't make like 500 microfarad caps anymore. I had to go to 570s, I think, or 560s, which is fine. I think I went to 270s here, and I think these are 56 instead of 50. It's not that critical. It isn't that critical. I just, I had to get whatever the closest value is, because, they used to have even numbers, and they just don't anymore. That's not how they're made. And I think I showed you this already. We got all the power side recapped. Something really comical. Here's one of the 500 microfarad caps off of the chassis. I'm not sure what these particular ones were for. They're obviously have something to do with the output, because there's two 500s and two 500s. I'm sure it's filtering, output filtering, or output coupling. And this is supposed to be 500 microfarads. So let's see what we get here. It tested completely bad a couple times, or unknown part. Yeah. If I could get it to, it was actually pretty comical, but it was showing up. It was showing up at like, 40 picofarads or something like that. I mean, it was really very funny. Yeah, it doesn't want to test. But anyways, yeah, these were absolutely shot. If you got one of these, you got to bulk recap it. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. These epoxy filled craptastic capacitors. These things are just no good. The Nichicon ones are a little bit better, but they've all doubled in value. All these other ones have just doubled in value pretty much. If I could get so here, this is supposed to be 500, so it's doubled in value. It's over 1,000 microfarads. The ESR is still relatively low, so that's fine. And then when I tested these, I didn't mark them yellow, so the audio tested showed that the ESR was okay, but they've doubled in value. And that might be important for this circuit. So anyways, that board's all redone. We're going to come back. We're going to do the multiplex board. We're going to do all the front end, all the electrolytics. It's all going to get done. So we'll do one board at a time. I'm probably going to call it quits for tonight, but we'll come back at it probably tomorrow evening. All right, we are just cruising right along here. We got all the front end recap there. I forget what this board is. I did a couple of things here. I had some cheaper, albeit okay, decent caps that were 4.7 microfarad 50 volt. These were 5 at 25. I just decided the Nichicons that I got that were 25 volt were 6.8 instead of 5 or 4.7. 4.7 is closer to 5, so I just left. I just put these cheaper caps in here. They tested out fine on the tester, so we'll just go ahead and roll with those. I just finished the Multiplex board here. So that's the main, I guess, probably supply filter cap for it. These were axials here. So this is how I install radials for axials, because axial capacitor is pretty hard to come by these days. So I just take and I bend the radial ones flat and angle them into the holes. And let's see, and then there was another one right here that was a 25 microfarad. I replaced it with 27. And I think I've got to go through the list and just double check my work here, but I think that actually fully recaps this radio. So really not a ton of electrolytics here, and the rest of them are disc caps. There is another type of cap on here, but they're some kind of a mica cap. I think they were interesting looking. I think it's those white things there. Not sure if those are a problem or not, but anyways, we went ahead and we got all the electrolytics changed out on this thing. So not really too difficult at all. So I'm going to go through and just check my work. I'll go through the list and I'll check each one of these off just to make sure that I got them all. And then we'll call it good. And I've kind of tested it along the way. I flip it on after doing a couple of caps, just that way you don't get too far ahead of yourself. And don't make a mistake that you can't get yourself out of easily without troubleshooting. So now that I've gone ahead and done all that, let's flip it on and see if it still works. And it's working. The stereo multiplex light is on. And we've got music. So not too difficult at all. Man, I'll tell you, this thing bumps now. So we went through the checklist, and yeah, I missed one cap. This is a 25 microfarad at, I think, 10 volts is what it was. Somehow, I either miscounted somewhere, but I ran out of the 27s that I got as a replacements for the 25s. I had put a 33 in here. It's totally fine. It's not that critical. This thing's working great. It's working great. Definitely the bad caps were not the Nichicons. The Nichicons all doubled in value, but they aren't bad. Their ESR is relatively decent. But those plastic ones that were epoxy filled that have no name brand on them, that were all in the output stage of the amplifier. One of them's a 500 microfarad capacitor and is reading 31 picofarad. So I think I might have mentioned that before. So definitely all those, the epoxy filled ones were bad. The Nichicon ones, they weren't bad, but they had gone way up in value, so they might as well have been bad. So I think that's pretty much going to wrap this one up. It's working pretty good. You know, it sounds decent. You know, it's not a hi-fi, but it is stereo, and it works really well. I'm pretty happy with the way this came out. The terminal strips are real good. You know, they came out nice. I was able to make the radial caps work where there were axial caps. You know, definitely some of the traces, you know, if you're working on one of these where there's a lot of heat, especially around where these resistors are, these resistors all run warm. You know, these caps, for whatever reason, this was getting warm over here. I don't know why that would be, but these traces were shot. So, you know, we did that repair there. It worked out pretty well. So, you know, I think this thing's ready to take a trip back to Palm Springs and get back into its stereo console for another 60 years. So we'll go ahead and we'll wrap this one up.